Welcome to God at Work, Stories of Grace and Faith. I'm your host, Chuck Groover, and today for basically the unscripted part, one thing that really came to my mind recently was here where I live, early voting has started, and basically last Saturday I went out, voted, so I don't have to worry about it on uh, election day, and after you vote, you usually get that sticker that says I voted. And out in my car, I took a picture of it, posted on Facebook that basically I went and did my civic duty. And then I basically said, I don't care who you vote for, just go out and vote. Because God in His sovereignty will put into office who He has ordained. And as I was driving away from where I voted at, I started thinking, as a Christian who believes in God's sovereignty, God's omniscience, His omnipotence, and that ultimately He is in control of everything. He puts into office or into positions of power who He wants, when He wants. Everything is done in His timing type thing. But yet, as a Christian, we still vote. We see the need to vote. And it really got me thinking how it seems like a lot of times as Christians we tend to focus on God's sovereignty really in a way of convenience. We will look at it in terms of elections as I vote for the candidate I believe in, but ultimately I know God is in control, regardless of who ends up in office. But then a lot of times we will also look at God's sovereignty in a way that if God's sovereign, basically in terms of what what a Calvinist would refer to as election or predestination, that basically God has ordained who's going to be saved and who's not, and therefore why is there the need to go out and evangelize? See, we look at voting, even though we know God's going to place in office who He wants, regardless of really how we vote, but we know He has a plan, we will still go out and vote. But yet, we know whoever God has ordained to be saved will ultimately be saved. We don't take the same view that, yeah, He's ordained, He knows that certain people will be saved, He knows who's going to be saved and all that, but we don't take the view that maybe we're the ones that He has ordained to be the person to share the gospel with that person in order for them to be saved. And it's just one thing that kind of got me thinking, again, how we will look at something essentially temporary because people we elect in office only hold that office depending on what positions you're voting for, anywhere from probably 2 to 6 years, especially in a national election. 2 years for Congress, 4 years for President, 6 years for Senate. And that's just a temporary position or a temporary thing that we see as our civic duty, but yet a duty as a Christian that we have that has longer lasting implications, we view it as someone else's job. And I guess pretty much what I'm getting at is, as a Christian, we should look at sharing the gospel essentially as our civic duty. As a Christian, much like voting is our civic duty. And pretty much that's all I have for Unscripted. This is also the first week of the month, in which, let me just give a recap, or tell you what to look at for next week, and on the fourth week, for my basically scheduled discussions next week. As I mentioned at the end of the episode on Francis of Assisi, I will look into basically his character and legacy. And then it's kind of wrapping up then on the fourth week, it's kind of wrapping up the Radical Faith series slash a kind of a message all on its own, that the title and the basis I pretty much borrowed from a Sunday school lesson from a friend, which he titled, and I've also titled this message, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So, again, this is Chuck Groover, and that's God at Work. Thank you for listening to God at Work, Stories of Grace and Faith. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at God at Work Podcast. If you have comments, suggestions, or a story you would like to be considered for the podcast, you can email us at stories@godatworkpodcast.com. If you enjoy this podcast and want to help support us, go to patreon.com/GodAtWorkPodcast, or you can also support us by leaving us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. God at Work, Stories of Grace and Faith is brought to you by Becoming God's Man Ministries, and is recorded and produced by me, Chuck Groover. Theme music for God at Work is by the band 39 Stripes and can be found at facebook.com/39stripes. And again, thank you for listening.